Well, that was my next question, was really about whether organisations actually kind of get it when it comes to the opportunity that there is here. So we appreciate it's a massive amount of spend. I've heard estimates of around kind of like $20 trillion global annual spend. It's a big number. It's a big number, but it's, 50% of total organisational spend globally is going to be a big number. And whether that's the right number or not, it's a big number. We know that. So it feels like I'm trying to look at this, kind of put my organisational hat on with the companies that we talk to and the problems that we see. It feels like something that's quite hard to pin down because it's spread across categories, because, some areas might be seen as being all consulting, top-level strategic consulting sits with the C-suite, not procurement, or procurement teams are generally quite lean. They might not be empowered. They might not be targeted towards this sort of thing. But then you've got to look at it from an organizational capacity and go maybe a level higher and go, does the CFO appreciate the opportunity that there is here? But to understand the opportunity, we need to understand what's the current baseline. So how do you think most organizations are managing this type of spend currently? What would you say is the kind of fairly standard?
Well, the model you've talked about in categories, in silos, if you ask me. Doing a great job in many cases, really understanding the category, but just being focused on the category and targeted on the category. And this is the challenge that procurement faces.
And if we look at the life cycle of procuring a service, which part of that would you say typically procurement are targeted on, in the sense that do procurement care what happens post-contract in most organizations? Because obviously they might be targeted on making, hard savings at the front end against budget, or, against, kind of going through competitive processes and things like that. Do you think that's where the majority of the kind of traditional procurement setup is focusing procurement people's attention, and where they feel that a remit is? Because it's very important to capture what happens post-contract, in my opinion, because did you get what was promised? And did it change? Do you think that, where do you think that focus lies typically?
As you say, exactly as you say, I would say. In most cases, it is designed around, and I've been through many, many discussions about, what's the target for procurement. And I've managed to persuade and influence a number of organizations to move away from, it's the hard savings, because they mean nothing in reality, which is then the reason that the procurement doesn't maintain and develop its seat at the table properly, because they're seen as just being savings chasers. And nowadays, yes, okay, the part of the organisation we go to help us manage risk in our supply chain, because we want our suppliers to fall over, and that wouldn't be a good thing. But that's a different dynamic. And then maybe the organisation that helps us meet our targets for Scope 3 or carbon or DE&I, right? But the reason that procurement are the recipients of those requests is because they often hold the data in one place. If they're working on if they have contract databases, if they have spend profile information, they're the one place to go. But I don't see that any of that as adding value to the organisation, and I think that's the problem. If you're continually focused, I had a conversation with a client this week who very proudly told me that they'd gone out to the market. They run a tender for consultancy firms, and they'd overall reduced the day rate by 10%. So fantastic, well done. So my question to him was then, so how are you going to control the fact that the amount of time spent on your work next year will be 15 to 20% more than it was this year?
Yeah.
He couldn't answer the question, and I don't blame him for that, but that's not the way that procurement is often targeted,
I was going to say,
or incentivized. Sorry, it's not his fault. He's given his objectives. Your objective is to reduce this, and then that's the problem, is that those numbers then go through to be signed off as savings, but the CFO signs them off, but knows they're not real savings, because the actual spend won't reduce by 10% next year because the volume will change.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very specific point around consulting spend and the challenge you have in that space. But there you go. It's procurement talk about, we're adding value to the business, but until you really understand the how to add that value and what that means and how it impacts the business, I mean, this is a very big conversation we're having now, right? About, how procurement works. But yeah, having worked in it long enough, I can see that. I see it every day, and I've worked with tens and tens of clients on it, on the same challenge.